Reading from a book called The History of Augusta, Georgia, where I'm born and raised. It's a lot of untapped history. Sure ain't gonna find it in no school book. It's pretty much just open and close, same old narrative. But all the years I've been living, I've been hearing the same thing from my mama. You full-blooded Cherokee, and your granddaddy get you, your Indian. I don't hear nothing about no African stuff. All that just came about. Well, matter of fact, 86, 88, something like that with old Jesse, but it is what it is. Most people just think of Augusta, they think about James Brown, the Masters, all that pretty much later. Which I pretty much, James Brown, one of the family members, really, he knew my grandma and them, so it is what it is. And everybody know he an Indian, but aside from saying that word, people call it something else. People say it wasn't no Indian. They had a whole different name. Same way with a whole lot of other countries. They just change the name of folks and just tell them you is who you is with that get down and lay down attitude. But some kind of way things will get right. It'll get better. So, without further ado, I'm going ahead and get this thing right. Here we go. This is the memorial history of Augusta, Georgia, from its settlement in 1735 to the close of the 18th century by Charles C. Jones, Jr. From the close of the 18th century to the present time by Salem Dutcher. Syracuse, New York, 1890. Skip all that preface. Let's go ahead and get straight to the chapter. Gotta work in the morning. Memorial History of Augusta, Georgia, Part 1, Chapter 1. Physical and social characteristics, customs, manufactures, occupations, and monuments of the Georgia tribes of Indians. Before entering upon our contemplated sketch of the settlement and early history of Augusta, a brief account of the physical and social characteristics, the customs, manufactures, monuments, and occupations of the Indian residents in this region at the time of the advent of the European may be deemed neither inappropriate nor uninteresting. When Oglethorpe planted the colony of Georgia at Yamacraw Bluff, down in Savannah, somewhere around that way, he was welcomed by a small tribe of Indians, little local runners, who had fixed their homes, led by a venerable and noted chief, Tomochichi by name. The ceded lands lying between the Savannah and the Altamaha rivers and extending from their headwaters indefinitely toward the west were then occupied by an aboriginal population, the principal settlements of which were established in the vicinity of rivers, in rich valleys, and upon the sea islands. The middle and lower portions of this and the adjacent territory were claimed and occupied by the Muskogees, or Creeks, consisting of many tribes and associated together in a strong confederacy. The Confederacy before the Confederacy. The lands possessed by the Muskogees comprehended the seats of the Seminoles in Florida and were bounded on the west by Mobile River. You heard of Mobile? And by the ridge which separates the waters of the Tombigbee from those of the Alabama, on the north by the Cherokee country, on the northeast by the Savannah River, and otherwise by the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. The Hittites residing on the Flint and Chattahoochee rivers, although originally a distinct people, spoke the Muskogee dialect and formed a component tribe of the Creek Confederation. The Seminoles, or Itse Seminoles, wild men, were pure Muskogees and received that name because they subsisted chiefly by hunting and were little given to agricultural pursuits. Sound like they jumped out the poach. They inhabited the peninsula of Florida. Both the Muskogees and the Hittites claimed to be autochthonous. the former asserting that their nation in the beginning issued out of a cave near the Alabama River, and the latter boasting that their ancestors had fallen from the sky. I don't like the Maya. The Uchis and the Natchez yielded obedience to the Muskogee Confederacy of the former. The original seats are supposed to have been east of the Coosa. They declared themselves to be the most ancient inhabitants of the territory, and it has been suggested that they were the people called Appalachians by the historians of De Soto's expedition. I'll show some pictures of De Soto's expedition and what he had to say too. Early in the 18th century, they dwelt upon the western bank of the Savannah River, and as late as 1736 possessed the country above and below the town of Augusta. The name of a creek in Columbia County perpetuates their memory to the present day and reminds us of their former occupancy of this region. Forsaking their old habitat on the left bank of the Mississippi, and journeying eastward, the Natchez associated themselves with the Creeks not many years prior to the advent of Oglethorpe. I think that was when the Spanish were doing all that raiding. I think they ran east. The division into upper, middle, and lower creeks was wholly artificial and was adopted by the English for geographical purposes. Cuseta, Coweta, Tucabachi, and Osuchi may be mentioned among the principal towns of the creeks. The Muskogee, the Hittite, the Yuchi, the Natchez, and the Alabaman or Cusata were the languages generally spoken by the various tribes composing the Creek Confederacy. Besides the nations we have enumerated as yielding obedience to and forming part of the Muskogee Confederation, remnants of the Cowetas, Tallapoosis, Coosas, Appalachias, Conshaks, and Cusatas, Ocmulgees, Oconis, Ochois, Keokes, Alabamans, Wetumpkas, Pecanas, Tansas, Chakishumas, and Abikas should not be forgotten. Man, a lot of people. Good God. North of Muskogee dwelt the Cherokees, a brave and comely race. They inhabited the hilly and mountainous parts of the country and exercised dominion even beyond the Tennessee River, where they were confronted by the Shawnees. The region, permeated by the sources of the Coosa, the Chattahoochee, the Savannah, the Santee, and the Yadkin, was held by them. Between the Cherokees and the Muskogees, the division line followed Broad River and generally the 34th parallel of north latitude. Of the number of red men dwelling at the date of English colonization within the geographical limits accorded to the modern state of Georgia, we may not speak with certainty. No census was taken, and all estimates then formed were mere approximations. We question whether the total population exceeded 50,000. Okay. These southern tribes, at the period of our first acquaintance with them, were well organized, occupied permanent homes, and were largely engaged in the cultivation of maize, beans, pumpkins, melons, and fruits of several sorts. Of native nuts they were fond. From them was extracted an oil, clear as butter, and of a good taste, says the gentleman of Elvas. With the bow and arrow, the blowgun, the spear, and the club were wild animals and birds killed for food. Fishes were captured with nets and harpoons and wares and by other ingenious mechanical contrivances. Their plantations were located in rich valleys where a generous soil yielded with least labor the most remunerative harvest upon islands and headlands and in the vicinity of streams where the products of the fields were readily supplemented by the fishes of neighboring waters and the game of adjacent forests. The grooved stone axe was employed in girdling trees. The circulation being thus interrupted, the trees perished and were then either consumed by fire or suffered to fall and not piecemeal. While to tribes, nations, and confederacies were accorded recognized territorial limits, and while such public domain, which is rivers, lakes, and woods, each member exercised equal rights for the purposes of travel, hunting, and fishing. A special or temporary ownership was admitted in lands cleared and cultivated by individual labor. If at first denuded of its forest by the united efforts of the villagers, the town plantation was subsequently parceled out among the adult inhabitants, who were therefore entitled to reap the fruits of their personal industry. Each year, at a appointed season, under the superintendence of overseers, the inhabitants of the village prepared the ground and sowed the seed. Upon the ingathering of the harvest, each Indian deposited in his crib the yield of his particular lot, contributing, however, a certain portion to the public granary, or king's storehouse. These public granaries served as depositories for dried fishes, alligators, dogs, deer, bear, and other jerk meats. From them were the chiefs supplied, and their contents were utilized in entertainment of strangers, for the relief of members of the community who might be overtaken by want, and in furnishing rations to warriors when setting out upon an expedition. Now, all this I just read, these people already had a plantation system. They was already growing stuff. They already had their community set up. But the story go, they died and everything else. But anyway, and they had to bring in some Africans to do all this stuff, but people's already doing it. So it don't seem like anybody showed them anything. Besides his lot in the general plantation, each villager cultivated a garden spot near his habitation, where maize, melons, beans, and other vegetables were produced. Various were the ceremonies and festivals observed by these primitive people when planting and harvesting the maize, and very general was its adoption as an article of food. Perhaps nothing tended more surely to develop and consolidate the southern tribes and to render permanent their habitations than the extensive cultivation of this important American plant. Corn, corn took over the world. People still using it. They're using it in cars. Ethanol. Their towns were usually small and circular in outline. Not infrequently, they were defended by stockades, enclosing spaces varying from 2 to 50 acres. The central position in the village was occupied by the dwelling of the Miko, chief or king. Around it, in the order of rank, were congregated the houses of the headmen. The cabins of the common people were circular or parallelogramic in plan. Their walls were made of upright poles, and their roofs were covered with swamp cane, palmetto leaves, moss, or earth. Each village had its council house where public deliberations were held. Sometimes, as at Talamico, there was a mausoleum wherein were preserved the skeletons of distinguished kings and priests. Occasionally, too, was erected an armory for the conservation of weapons and treasures. If located at a removed from river, lake, or natural spring, an artificial pond was excavated to furnish the town with the requisite supply of fresh water. Hold on real quick. Let me see something. That's Telemico right there in South Carolina, ain't it? Okay. Oh, this is the Soto route. All the towns he went through. They say he went through Augusta. Well, I guess he's seen something good on the way there. Anyway, we're going to get back to describing this stuff. At the period of our earliest acquaintance with them, these people were divided into families, tribes, and confederacies. Over the confederacy or nation ruled the king, counseled and supported by chiefs of component tribes. The office was elective, and the advancement to the highest grade was usually accorded to him most worthy of the reasonable position. As chief magistrate, he presided over the grand council, commanded the entire labor and obedience of his subjects, directed public affairs, both civil and military, and with powers well high despotic, exercised the functions of king, judge, advisor, master, and leader. To subordinate chiefs was conceded rank according to their age, wisdom, valor, and the strength of their following. Head warriors, high priests, and conjurers were important personages in this primitive society. Okay. They primitive, but I learned the plantation system from them and how to grow food. Cause y'all ain't come for that. Y'all came for natural resources. Y'all ain't want nothing to eat. The latter often united the callings of priest, physician, and fortune teller, presumed to be in constant communication with spirits, both good and evil. They were smoking weed. And weed do have you tripping. Addicted to numerous and extravagant incantations, possessing charms mysterious and to the common mind inexplicable, indulging in prolonged and violent contortions while practicing their deceptions, exhibiting no inconsiderable knowledge of simples, filters, and medicinal herbs. Administering fumigations, inhalations, baths, bloodlettings, sacrifications, oh, scarifications. Oh, local applications and emetics, these medicine men imposed largely upon the credulity of the community and exacted liberal rewards from their patients, who in pain and superstition regarded the ravings of these quacks as the utterances of a divine tongue, beheld the behavior of these cunning impostors with awe, and submitted without hesitation to the remedies they prescribed. Beyond doubt, however, these medicine men excelled in the treatment of many distempers, and remarkable were the cures which they effected. Wow. Both the Muskogees and the Cherokees were, at the time of our first acquaintance with them, and had been for a long time, engaged in the erection of tumuli of earth, stone, and shells. Some of no mean dimensions were constructed within the historic period, while most of them have withstood the disintegrating influences of many centuries. Animal, bird-shaped, and emblematic structures are rarely seen. Space does not permit us to attempt a classification or description of these prominent indications of early occupancy and primitive labor, and yet we cannot refrain from alluding to the existence of truncated pyramids, constructed of earth, rising from 10 to 75 feet above the level of the valleys and plains upon which they are located, constituting elevations for temples for sun worship, and at other times foundations for the residences of kings, chiefs, and priests, of conical mounds truncated and placed upon commanding bluffs and hilltops, which served as signal stations in this densely wooded region. Fires kindled upon their summits with their glare by night and their smoke by day, giving tokens which repeated from kindred mounds along the reaches of rivers or on answering immenses within a period much shorter than that allotted to the swiftest runner, warned tribe and nation of impending danger, of artificial elevations springing from the depths of extensive swamps liable to inundation, which served either as retreats during seasons of sudden overflow or as foundations for the dwellings of those who were there hunted and fished, of grave mounds, sometimes containing a single skeleton and denoting the last resting place of king or priest, and at other times covering the many dead of family or tribe, and of stone piles designating the spots where warriors of note had fallen in battle. Cremation and unburial in some localities were in vogue. Were we not precluded by the general character of this sketch, it would be interesting to note the funeral customs observed by these Georgia tribes. Boy, we have a long funeral, and to describe the various modes of sepulture adopted by them. Nor are we now permitted, in enumerating the proofs of early possession and combined labor, to do more than refer to the presence of circumvallations of earth and stone by which hilltops and eminences were fortified, to the existence of embankments of earth and ditches isolating considerable areas and protecting villages, temple mounds and playgrounds, to the traces of fish preserves, of chunky yards, of pottery kilns, of pits whence clay was dug for the manufacture of thick tile ware, of excavations where pot stone was quarried, and of open air workshops. Among these indicia of primitive occupancy may also be mentioned extensive refuse piles and shell heaps composed of marine fluviatile and lacustrine shells, upon the animals of which the natives fed, and from which they extracted pearls in large quantities. They actually did find shells and stuff up in Columbia County. Stallings Island, matter of fact. That's I guess it's from like a couple thousand years ago when they say the waters was up and like what wasn't no Florida, half of Georgia was gone, most of the southern and eastern coast wasn't there. So okay. Aside from the profuse and fanciful ornamentation of their bodies with pigments of red, white, blue, yellow, and black, these Indians displayed no inconsiderable taste in depicting signs, marks, images, and symbols on prepared skins and on wood, bone, and stone. They making tattoos. Come on now. The smooth bark of a growing tree or the face of a rock was incised with commemoration of some feat of arms, an explanation of the strength or direction of a military expedition, or in solemnization of a treaty of peace, upon precipitous slopes and at points almost inaccessible have been noted carved and colored representations of the sun, accompanied by rude characters, the significance of which is in the main unintelligible to the modern observer. Roughly cut intaglios in imitation of the human form, of the hands and feet of men, of the tracks of buffalo, deer, and other animals, of bows and arrows, canoes, circles, and other devices are still extant. Ignorance, ignorant of alphabet, phonetic sign, or digit, these people, by means of this primitive system of picture writing and intaglios, sought to perpetuate the recollection of prominent events, and by such visible shapes to communicate intelligence. This effort was supplemented by the use of wampum. Their boldest attempts at sculpture are represented by stone images which encourage the impression that while they acknowledged the existence of a great spirit, venerated the sun as the source of life and heat and light, and entertained some notions of a future state, these Indians were given to something nearly akin to idol or hero worship. Well, they weren't Christian or Catholic or Muslim. Hmm, okay. Ignorant of the use of iron and bronze and treating it as a malleable stone, the southern Indians hammered copper into various forms of utility and ornament. Among these may be enumerated ceremonial axes, gouges, chisels, knives, spearheads, arrow points, wristbands, armlets, anklets, gorgets, spangles, beads, pendants, rods, and spindles for perforating pearls. Famous were the arrow makers of this region, party-colored jaspers, smoky, milky, and sweetwater quartz, crystal, chalcedony, and varieties of flint and shirt were the favorite materials from which spear points and arrowheads were chipped. Every known variety here finds expression, and specimens of unusual beauty and symmetry abound. Their bows were as thick as a man's arm, 11 or 12 spans in length, of a single curve, and were capable of projecting arrows a long distance and with remarkable power. Bowstrings were made of stag's gut or of deerskin thongs, well twisted. A supply of arrows was carried in a fawn skin quiver, which depended from the right hip. The light, tough river cane formed the customary arrow shaft, and to it the stone, bone, or wooden tip was fastened by means of moistened sinews, a glue made of the velvet horns of the deer, and a resinous preparation. With such artillery did these people wage wars and provide themselves with deer, buffalo, deer, wild turkeys, game of various sorts, and large fisheries. Large fish. Man, that's cool. Of groove axes, celts, perforated hatchets, and ceremonial axes, the varieties were abundant and the manufacture was most admirable. Stone hoes, adzes, picks, scrapers, gouges, awls, knives, cutting implements, saws, leaf-shaped implements, smoothing and crushing stones, hammer stones, spades, mortars, pestles, nut stones, and various objects of bone, shell, and stone declare the occupation, industry, and mechanical labors of these nations. Discordial stones still remind us of the famous chunky game, and many forms of pipes revived the memories of the native tobacco plant and of the esteem in which it was held by the natives. To the pottery of this region, the Knight of Elvis paid high compliment when he described it as little differing from that of Eskimos or Montemor. That's over there in Spain. Something that the Moors built over there. Look the same, but it ain't. Although unacquainted with the use of the potter's wheel, these savages excelled in the ceramic art. They call it Chinaware, China cabinets and all that stuff. The stuff your grandma tell you don't mess with ceramic art. Bestowing special care upon the selection of their clays and their admixture with powdered shells, gravel, and pulverized mica, and upon the forms and the ornamentation of their vessels, surviving the changes of more than a century and a half, and affording glimpses of ancient taste and customs, these fictile articles are among the most interesting remains which have come down to us. Pearls and shell ornaments were extensively worn by the members of the Georgia tribes, both male and female. The oysters of the Gulf of Mexico and the pearl-bearing unios of the southern rivers and lakes supplied in great abundance these coveted ornaments. Through the intervention of primitive merchants and by means of extensive trade relations, they were carried far into the interior. He who traded in them was welcomed everywhere. From marine, fluviatile, and lacustrine shells were manufactured beads, gorgets, pendants, arm guards, masks, pins, drinking cups, spoons, and money. Margariferous shells were diligently collected. They were opened by fire. Sound like clams. The animals they contained were eaten, and the pearls found within them were perforated and worn as beads about the neck, wrist, and waist and ankles. Tall, erect, copper-colored, with long, straight black hair, with prominent noses and cheekbones, with regular features, arched brows and eyes, rather small, but active and full of fire, usually grave in deportment, reserved in conversation, tenacious of natural rights, hospitable to strangers, kind to members of their own tribe, honest, haughty, and cruel to an enemy, crafty, valiant, capable of great endurance, indifferent to pain, and often engaged in war, expert in hunting and fishing, fond of music and dancing, observant of festivals, nimble of foot, skilled in the use of bow and arrow, the club, the stone axe, cane, harpoon, and the blowgun, patient of fatigue and hunger, yet given to idleness and frequent meals, addicted to smoking, acknowledging the existence of his supreme being, adoring the sun as the symbol of life and heat, entertaining some notions of an existence beyond the grave, plagued with visions, dreams, trances, and the influences of malign and lesser divinities, worshiping the devil and offering human sacrifices and propitiation of the spirit of evil, indulging to some extent in image worship and perpetuating the memory of their distinguished dead by mounds and figures of wood and stone, excelling in the manufacture of fictile ware, boats of single trees, shawls, coverings, mantles, beautifully woven and adorned with feathers, articles of dress made of the skins of buffalo, bear, and deer, carefully prepared, dyed, and colored, fishing lines and nets of the inner bark of trees, mats and baskets of split cane, reeds and rushes, and laboriously constructed wares for the capture of fishes, extensively engaged in the fabrication, use, and interchange of various articles, and implements of wood, bone, shell, copper, and stone, frequently monogamous. The contubernal relationship being dissoluble at the will of the male, the chiefs and principal men claiming and appropriating as many wives as fancy and station dictated, ornament loving, jealous of their possessions, given to agriculture, obedient to kings. Thus runs a general description of these primitive inhabitants prior to the advent of the Europeans. Certain it is that the inroads of these foreigners violently shocked this aboriginal population, imparting new ideas, introducing contagious, formerly unknown interrupting customs long established, overturning acknowledged forms of government, impoverishing whole districts, engendering a sense of insecurity until that time unfelt, instigating intertribal wars, causing marked changes, and entailing losses and demoralizations far more potent than we are inclined at first thought to imagine. The operation of that inexorable law which subordinates the feebler to the will of the stronger has compassed the utter expatriation of the red race from the limits of Georgia. Nevertheless, Indian memories linger among our hills, cling to our mountains, and are intimately associated with our noblest rivers. Tamoli still dot our valleys, and the plowshare upturns physical tokens of a former and almost forgotten occupancy. It's pretty decent. Let me take a look at what the Soto talking about. Talamico was close to Cafetachiqui, which, when the Spaniards visited it, was the principal settlement and the residence of the head chief, or as it happens, chieftainess, of a group of towns, which was probably the nucleus of the body of Indians, known to later history as Lower Creeks. Elsewhere, I have given reasons for identifying Cafetachiqui with the later Creek town of Cashita. It may have been Coweta rather than Cashita, but that was also a leading Lower Creek town. The names Cafetachiqui and Talamico certainly come from a Muskogean dialect, and Talamico, or Talamico as Ranja has it, is from the Creek language proper, or Muskegee, with scarcely a shadow of a doubt. It is from Tawa, town or tribe, and Emiko, chief to it, or chief to them, a name corresponding perfectly with the headship assigned the place by De Soto's native informants. Hmm. Oh, I had jumped to another book, my bad. This is the De Soto narratives. Basically, when they say Talamico, they just talking about a town. Let me jump off in De Soto narrative real quick. What they talking about? It's amazing to see all that. Let me scroll for a second on that page 4. And 5. Oh, there we go. And this De Soto and his people. Let me read a little something for that. The worst blunders we discover are in estimates of the number of Indians encountered in various places and in the size of towns. Thus, Garcilaso says there were 600 houses in Ocali, 200 in Vatachuco, 200 in Asachali, 500 in Coca, 200 in the Chickasaw town, 500 good houses in Pacaha, 300 in Guacoya, 400 in Anilco, and 200 in Amanoya. These figures can hardly be accepted unless we count in corn cribs and other outbuildings. And certainly we must take exception to the size of the 80 Mavilla houses, each of which is said to have been capable of holding 1,000 to 1,500 men, and none less than 600, and to the dimensions of the temple of Talamico. Now, Talamico a temple. It was a town, now it's a temple. Okay. 100 paces by 40. Okay, I see it. I see it. Oh, they're down in Florida too. Yeah. Play around a little bit. What we got? The number of Spanish who embarked from Havana on the expedition was 1,000, not counting sailors, whereas Ron says 570. Okay. They landed in Tampa Bay. These folk popping up anyway. This ain't got nothing to do with Augusta. I'm just looking at stuff. I had to prepare for some more stuff. Let me jump back to my stuff anyway. They paid 8. There are enough flat-top, steep-sided mounds with ramps in the southeast to confirm all of this, except perhaps the dimensions given and the use of retaining timbers. If the employment of the latter should be confirmed, it would establish an additional point of resemblance between the pyramidal earth mounds and the stone-faced structures of the Maya. At least Garcilaso furnishes us with pretty definite proof, if any more were needed, that mound building was a current and not an extinct industry in the Gulf region. They say it's current. Okay. They tell us this 10,000 years ago or something. Folks still doing it. Okay. Now we got another person. Says Talamico was close to Confitechique, which, when the Spanish visited, was the principal settlement and the residence of the head chief, or as it happened, chieftainess of a group of towns, which was probably the nucleus of the body of Indians known to later history as Lower Creeks. Okay. Gangster. Oh. In another place, I have expressed the opinion that Confitechique was somewhere near Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, but from the Pardo narratives, it is clear that it was below the present Augusta, Georgia, at or not far from Silver Bluff, which is literally like 5 or 10 miles from Augusta, right there in Carolina. The place assigned it by most earlier investigators. In this case, the traditional view appears to be uphill. We know that Talamico was close by. Okay. I'm just looking up stuff. Look like we had towns all over. And that's supposed to be where DeSoto was going all through. And Talamico look like it's over there in like Orangeburg or something. I don't know. Who knows? Let me check that map out right here though. Now, this is Augusta. That's Fort Moore. I ain't even got to the second and third chapters yet, but I'm just doing a little talking. You got the Uchi Creek, the Ogeechee River. What that? Yama Cross, right there by Savannah. Okay. It's an old map too. Let's see, we got Augusta, Fort Moore, Silver Bluff right up in that area. And you got SRS somewhere over there. Man, I got a whole bunch of stuff, man. This is the first video, man. I'm just tripping real quick, though. I had to read that first chapter. Other than that, though, I have some more stuff. I'll probably do the second and third chapter and stuff. Yeah. And that's the crazy thing, though. They say all these people are part of the Muscogee Confederacy. So they running from all the way up here, all the way over here to the Mississippi. Come on, man. Look how far that is. Pensacola Bay. And that Choctaw, Alabama owns. Tallapoosa. There they go. Towns. Yeah, what it is. It's a beautiful map. You got the mountain region. I throw some more stuff together. I'm just tripping. Ebenezer. Yeah, I think they were pretty decent right here. Coweta. The crazy thing is, a lot of these places still got the same names. Like Savannah still got the same name of the people they say that was there, that they gave the name to. You got the Ogeechee, you got the Okmulgee, Oconee. Come on, man. Ichechi, Chickasaws, all that stuff. They ain't there, but yeah. Saluda, Tougaloo. It's not that plan, man. They got Westos way over here. I thought the Westos started off in Augusta. Westa. So they ran all them this way. Okay. Anyway, that's just one map. They were the Temuka map right there. So these people was already popping and all doing their thing. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and do chapter 2 then. Chapter 2. Savannah Town, Settlement of Augusta, earliest depiction of the place, a trading post, names of the first traders. As early as 1716, Savannah Town, subsequently better known as Fort Moore, just looked at it, was located on the left bank of the Savannah River, only a few miles below the site at present occupied by the village of Hamburg. Its establishment and maintenance were favored by the Carolina authorities in order that a profitable trade with the Creeks and Cherokees might be facilitated. To this point, goods were transported from Charleston by both land and water. The first agent in charge of the storehouse erected at this place was Captain Theophilus Hastings. He was assisted by John Sharp and Samuel Muckleroy. This settlement derived its name from the Sawanos or Savannahs, a native tribe dwelling upon its banks and giving name to the river which flowed it. Mm-hmm. So rapidly did the traffic with the Aborigines increase that before the close of the year, Hastings applied for 3 additional assistants to aid him in his conduct. At Savannah Town, a laced hat then readily commanded 8 buckskins, a calico petticoat could not be purchased for less than 12. Teach y'all about that petticoat. We got Petticoat Junction right over there. Right across the bridge in South Carolina. They talking about they named it after some TV show. No. Anybody know what a petticoat is? They ain't nothing but like a little, well, it's like the little slip that go into your dress, but okay. That's what they named it for. So petticoats are old. Might be something European, but it's pretty much old. And so great was the demand for salt, gunpowder, lead, kettles, rum-looking glasses, ornaments, and other articles of European manufacture that the traders were allowed by the commissioners to exact as much as the natives could be persuaded to give in exchange for them. Upon the settlement of Augusta and the opening of storehouses at that place, Savannah Town lost ground as a trading post and eventually fell into decay. Fort Moore, however, built up 6-inch plank nailed to posts of light wood, with 4 towers at the angles on which small field pieces were mounted, with curtains loopholed for small arms, and with wooden barracks capable of accommodating a garrison of 100 men, was for many years afterwards preserved as a military establishment. Savannah Town. Okay. So, Savannah Town, Fort Moore, Hamburg. Wow. Name changes. I don't know if anybody know about the Hamburg Massacre. Either way it go. Where was I? Having confirmed the settlements at Savannah, Darien, and Frederica, all those are German places, by the way, because majority of the people that came to Georgia were Germans from King George III peoples, because they ain't really fool with South Carolina like that. That was King Charles and people, so yeah, got the Stuarts. Having confirmed the settlements at Savannah, Darien, and Frederica, with a view to extending the limits of the colonization to the northward, and with the intention of influencing, in behalf of the province of Georgia, the extensive Indian trade which had been monopolized by South Carolina, Mr. Oglethorpe, toward the close of 1735, ordered that a town should be marked out on the right bank of the Savannah River at the head of navigation and just below the falls. In honor of a royal princess, he called it Augusta, and during the following year gave instructions for its population and defense. Warehouses were constructed, and these were supplied with such goods as the natives coveted. You couldn't build it without somebody telling you can build it. You even come cutting up by the trees down in their yard without getting permission. But we're going to see how that goes. Regulations were promulgated and enforced looking to fair dealing between seller and purchaser. It was the purpose of the founder of the colony of Georgia in all his dealings with the savages to do equity and to permit no commercial intercourse save by licensed traders who were held to strict accountability. The Indians soon perceived the advantages according to them by the Georgia agents and quickly transferred to Augusta the traffic which hitherto had been conducted at Savannah Town. So they jumped the river, went to where all the other business was. Okay. At the outset, the only communication with the town was by means of the Savannah River, which was utilized alike by traders ascending in boats from Charlestown and Savannah, and by Indians traversing the upper portions of the stream in canoes. Soon, however, a road was opened between Augusta and Savannah by way of Ebenezer, which materially contributed to the convenience of the dwellers in those at that time distant localities. That same road is still there. Matter of fact, I think it's like Highway 56 or something. Either way. The earliest account we have of Augusta is contained in a state of the province of Georgia, attested upon oath in the court of Savannah, November 10th, 1740. It runs as follows. 7 miles above New Windsor, on the Georgia side, lies the town of Augusta, just below the falls. This was laid out by the trustees' orders in the year 1735, which has thriving prodigiously. There are several warehouses, thoroughly well furnished with goods for the Indian trade, and 5 large boats belonging to the different inhabitants of the town, which can carry about 9 or 10,000 weight of deer skins, each making 4 or 5 voyages at least in a year to Charlestown for exporting to England, and the value of each cargo is computed to be from 12 to 1,500 sterling. Hither all the English traders with their servants resort in the spring, and 'tis computed above 2,000 horses come hither at that season, and the traders pack horsemen, servants, townsmen, and others depending upon that business, are moderately computed to be 600 white men who live by their trade, carrying upon pack horses all kinds of proper English goods, for which the Indians pay in deer skins, beaver, and other furs. Each Indian hunter is reckoned to get 3,000 weight of deer skins in a year. This is a very advantageous trade to England, since it is mostly paid for in woolen and iron. Above this town, to the northwest and on the Georgia side of the river, the Cherokees live in the valley of the Appalachian Mountains. They were about 5,000 warriors, but last year it's computed they lost 1,000, partly by the smallpox, and partly, as they themselves say, by too much rum brought from Carolina. I know what that alcohol do, boy. It ain't good. The French are striving to get this nation from us, which, if they do, Carolina must be supported by a vast number of troops or lost. But as long as we keep the town of Augusta, our party and the Cherokees can be so easily furnished with arms, ammunition, and necessaries that the French will not be able to gain any ground there. The Creek Indians live to the westward of the town. Their chief town is the Coetus, 200 miles from Augusta. So literally, they live in Augusta because the Europeans lived in a fort, which was not that big. So okay, and 120 miles from the nearest French fort. The lower creeks consisted of about 1,000, and the upper creek of about 700 warriors, upon the edge of whose country the French fort of Albemarle live. They are esteemed to be sincerely attached to His Majesty's interests. Below the creeks lie the brave Chickasaws, who inhabit near the Mississippi River and possess the banks of it. These have resisted both the bribes and arms of the French. Okay. Well, they ain't messing with them boys. And traitors sent by us amongst them. At Augusta, there is a handsome fort where there is a small garrison of about 12 or 15 men besides officers. And one reason that drew the traders to settle the town of Augusta was the safety they received from this fort, which stands upon high ground on the side of the Savannah River, which is there 140 yards wide. I told you they lived in the fort. That's literally where, what is that, St. Paul's Church. That's about the size of somebody's yard. That is not big. Anyway. Another reason was the richness and fertility of the land. The great value of this town of Augusta occasioned the general to have a path marked out through the woods from thence to Old Ebenezer, and the Cherokee Indians have marked out one from thence to their nation, so that horsemen can now ride from the town of Savannah to the nation of Cherokees and any other of the Indian nations all on the Georgia side of the river. But there are some bad places which ought to be causewayed and made good, in which the general says he has not yet capacity to do. This road begins to be frequented and every day be more and more so, and by it the Cherokee Indians can at any time come down to our assistance. From another contemporaneous account, we learn that in 1739, above 6,000 bushels of Indian corn and a considerable quantity of wheat were harvested by the citizens of Augusta for home consumption, and that during the same year about 100,000 weight of skins was brought from thence. The two tracts from which we have quoted, published under the sanction of the trustees and designed to convey a most favorable impression of the progress of the colony of Georgia, evoked counter statements from the disaffected. In one of these, we find the following statements and affidavits relating to the then condition of Augusta. A list of such traders, men, and horses as come from other parts and only pass through or by Augusta in their way to the Creek Nation. A list of the whole inhabitants of the township of Augusta in Georgia. That was not that many people. A list of traders, men, and horses employed from Augusta in the Chickasaw and Creek trade. The day above written, John Gardner of Augusta, Indian trader, personally came and appeared before me, John Fallowfield, one of the bailiffs of the town of Savannah, and made oath that the several accounts of traders, horses, and men employed in the Creek and Chickasaw nations, and also the list of the white persons, men, women, and children, now living in the township of Augusta are, to the best of the said deponent's knowledge, just and true, and that the persons residing in and belonging to the fort of Augusta are not contained in the said list above, and on the other side of this paper written. The deposition of Kennedy O'Brien of Augusta. That's an Irish guy, O'Brien. Okay. In the colony of Georgia, merchant, one of the first inhabitants of the said township, and a constant resident therein ever since the first settlement thereof, who, being duly sworn on the holy evangelist of Almighty God, saith that whereas he hath been informed that a representation hath lately been made and transmitted to the honorable the trustees for establishing the said colony of Georgia, setting forth the flourishing state and condition of the said colony in general, and of the said township of Augusta in particular, and the said deponent being willing to undeceive any or all who may be here thereby induced to give credit to the said representation, doeth voluntarily and of his own accord declare and maintain the following truth to be strictly just, that there are not more than 40 white men, inhabitants and residents of the said township of Augusta, save only the soldiers in garrison there, which are about 15 or 20 more, that all or most of the corn that have been made and raised there have been wrought and manufactured by Negroes belonging to the said inhabitants, and those opposed to them on the north side of the river in South Carolina, that at least 1/3 part of the corn reported to be raised in Augusta is raised in South Carolina, hard by the said township, that there are not more than 500 horses employed in the Indian trade that resort to Augusta, although it is esteemed the key to the Creek, the Chickasaw, and the Cherokee nations, and that the most of those horses and persons employed about them and interested and concerned in them do as often go to New Windsor in South Carolina to trade as to Augusta, that there are now in Augusta but 3 trading houses, and those in a state of decay and languishing condition, and that through the ill regulation of the Indian trade, and this deponent further said that no oil, wine, nor olives have ever been produced at Augusta, or have ever been attempted to be raised or cultivated there to the best of this deponent's knowledge. And further this deponent saith not. Deeming it very important to obtain the consent of the natives to the settlement of Europeans within the territory claimed by them. Hold on, run that back. Deeming it very important to obtain the consent of the natives to the settlement of Europeans within the territory claimed by them, and regarding the goodwill of the Indians as essential to the secure and peaceable residence of the colonists, Mr. Oglethorpe directed his earliest attention to making treaties of alliance with the red men, that these treaties should include agreements for mutual intercourse and trade seemed not only prudent but indispensable, particularly as Tomochichi and the Mikos of the Creeks, who accompanied him to England, had requested that stipulations should be entered into regarding the quantity, quality, and prices of goods, and the accuracy of the weights and measures used in determining the value of the articles offered in exchange for buffalo hides, deerskins, peltry, etc. The trustees therefore established certain regulations designed to prevent in future the impositions of which the Indians complained. To carry these into effect, it was thought proper that none should be permitted to trade with the Indians except such as should apply for and receive special license, and agree to conduct the traffic according to prescribed rules, and upon fair and equitable principles. It was doubtless of these regulations intended to protect the natives that the affiant O'Brien complained when he alluded to the ill regulation of the Indian trade, the introduction of rum, and the employment of slave labor within the confines of Georgia were then strictly forbidden, while the accounts furnished by the trustees and those submitted by certain of the colonists who were not in accord with their purposes in the administration of the important trust touching the early prosperity of Augusta are not harmonious. It may not be questioned that this town, as a trading post, rapidly assumed an importance far beyond that which could be fairly claimed by any other settlement within the confines of the province. Multitudes of Indians flocked hither at certain seasons of the year. Hence, the traders departed to exchange their goods for the peltry of the natives dwelling far in the interior, and here were deposited both the merchandise and intended for barter and the skins obtained in traffic. Oh my goodness, it's a lot. Boats were constantly ascending and descending the Savannah River. It was a busy scene in the midst of wild woods, this constant arrival and departure of a picturesque trading population, this recurring receipt and shipment of goods, this ceaseless exchange of commodities. So advantageous was its situation that Augusta was, for many years, reckoned the most important mart for Indian traffic within the limits of both Georgia and of South Carolina. O'Brien began the settlement of the town largely at his individual charge, and by him was the first commodious storehouse there erected. As a reward for his energy and enterprise, General Oglethorpe, on the 8th of March 1739, recommended the trustees to grant him and the heirs male of his body 500 acres of land. Roger de Lacy, a noted Indian trader, was another prominent pioneer who materially assisted in the development of the little town. At an early period of its existence, a detachment of 10 men under the command of Captain Kent was sent up and supported by the Trust for the protection of the inhabitants of Augusta. A small fort with wooden walls, musket-proof, and armed with a few small iron pieces was erected upon the river bank where St. Paul's Church now stands. Within were quarters for the garrison, and the structure was mainly intended as a place of retreat in seasons of danger. The dwellings of the early inhabitants were limited in their capacity and builded of wood. They were distributed along the riverfront. The land stretching away to the south was marish, covered by a dense growth of forest trees, and permeated here and there by sluggish lagoons. The Savannah River was then limpid and abounded in animal life. The woods were filled with deer, wild turkeys, squirrels, raccoons, possums, ducks, woodcock, wood, okay, and rabbits. While at certain seasons and at no great remove, herds of buffalo roamed through the interior. We literally had a buffalo ranch right there in Grovetown. Remember that when I was little? Okay. And they said it was all out west, though. Yeah. The soil was fertile to the last degree, and agriculture was not long neglected. Contrary to the wish and the injunction of the trustees, Negro slaves were hired from their Carolina owners and employed in clearing lands and in cultivating cereals, among which Indian corn predominated. I give you a little something on them Negro slaves. Trade, however, engrossed the general attention, and complaint was made of the sharp practice of some of the settlers who, in their anxiety to drive the earliest bargain with both incoming natives and returning pack horsemen, removed from the village and recking neither the isolation nor the dangers of their exposed situations, located their dwellings and little storehouses along the paths leading into the Indian country. Of schools and schoolmasters, of churches and parsons, of doctors and lawyers, there were none. The wants of these early inhabitants were few, and of intellectual life. For more than a decade, there seems to have been little. The business of the inhabitants was the procurement and exchange of duffel, salt, gunpowder, lead, kettles, beads, rum, looking glass, trinkets, and other articles of European manufacture for peltry, venison, and ponies offered by the Indians. So in other words, y'all ain't had nothing to eat. Oh my goodness. So y'all sitting around there with glasses and well, you had alcohol, so you can drink until you can't drink no more. Anyway, kind of hard to colonize when you ain't got enough strength. As Savannah long continued to be the capital and commercial metropolis of the colony, and as Frederica, before the middle of the century, became the Thermopylae of the southern Anglo-American provinces, so did Augusta. For many years, maintained her supremacy as the chief trading post within the confines of Georgia, the point through which flowed the main current of commerce between the English and the native population. Oh my goodness, that was fun. I'm gonna read some more on the next one. Next one will be chapter 3. General Oglethorpe's visit to Augusta, his conference with the Creeks at Coweta Town, Colonel Stevens' account of the progress of the plantation. Oglethorpe's fairness in dealing with the Indians, introduction of slave labor, Reverend Jonathan Cobb, distribution of the presents for Indians, fort at Augusta. Told you, a fort. It wasn't the whole city. It was just really probably an acre, maybe 2 acres. It's by the river walk. Everything else was habited. Early legislation, Governor Reynolds' representation, parishes established representation and petition from Augusta. That'll be the next chapter. I'm not gonna read that. Contrary to the wish and the injunction of the trustees, Negro slaves were hired from their Carolina owners and employed in clearing lands and in cultivating the cereals among which Indians predominated. Let's see who these people was from Carolina. Let's see what we got here. Carolina. We'll get to it some other time. I have to explain that about them. There's a whole lot of fighting going on over there. I know they're gonna go into that crazy explanation of slavery and stuff. But yes, that is Savannah Town. This little area right here. Savannah Town. And you got Silver Bluff, Golfing Plantation, Shield Bluff. Got a long way to go. That's just chapter 2. Oh my goodness. Appreciate that. If anybody want to know what this avatar is, that is a statue of a Mayan down in the Okefenokee Swamp. I seen that when I went down there a couple of years ago. They say so many people dead and gone, and people were here and there, and everybody suddenly became somebody they ain't. But we'll see. We got a lot more to go. I'm enjoying it though. Appreciate y'all for watching it. Hopefully this stick. Let me know what's up, what y'all think about it. Send me some comments. I do watch a lot of YouTube. I watch more YouTube on work than I do work. What else I got? Oh, that's it for now. Appreciate y'all, man. Y'all leave me some comments, man. Tell me what's up with this chat, man. Like I say, man, I'm born and raised in Augusta, man. Both of my granddaddies is from Georgia, and both of my grandmamas is from South Carolina. So, nothing about that other stuff. I sure appreciate the internet though. Well, I go crazy on this thing. Shoot. Matter of fact, I just seen some people from England downtown. That dude told me we was looking at a building. I said, "Hey man," I said, "How old you think the building is?" He said, "Man, 1870." I said, "Wow, for real, 1870?" I said, "Nah, man, that building older than that, man. Matter of fact, it was the Imperial Theater. Talking about some 1870. I was like, nah, man, that's older than that, man. They just repurposed this building." Mm-hmm. I'm talking about, yeah, they did a lot of work, and they built the city up and stuff. I was like, yeah. He said, I was like, yeah, man, you know, this place been here probably, what I'm saying, a couple thousand of years, man. I say, you look at the sidewalk, you can see that there's an underground. You can go around the corner and see the underground where it's like probably 20, 30 feet underground. And shoot, the sidewalk just covering up the rest of the building. I'm like, oh, really? Yeah, man. You from England. Cut that out, man. I said, it was people already here that built this place up. And his wife was like, yeah, the Indians were here. I was like, yeah, yeah. A whole lot of Indians was here. They built the whole city. But Europeans was here too, working out with it. But for the most part, they ain't do much. But either way it go, man. Good people out there in the world, man. I don't do the color thing, man. I don't do all that black and white stuff, man. I done gained too much knowledge of this stuff to be talking about some black and white folks. And once you start looking at all them records and start looking at people they classifying as white, you be like, boy, stop. No, you ain't no white dude. You're probably a free white person in law, but you's a Negro. But it is what it is. I appreciate y'all, man. I'm gonna holler at y'all.